All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start with some just kind of general housekeeping, I guess. So first of all, just want to make sure everybody's in the right place. This is the Residential Rental License Program overview. My name is Nicole Kim. I'm with Denver Department of Excise and Licenses. We are the agency that is implementing this license requirement. Couple of things. So first of all, this meeting is being recorded. So if you speak or if you're on video or anything like that, that will be there. And then if you need interpretation, we do have Spanish interpretation. So you can click to join one of those rooms if you click interpretation on the button there. I see already a couple of questions in the chat. I just want to clarify, if you are not speaking, if you could go ahead and mute, and we'll do Q&A at the end. The presentation that I have is about like 25 minutes, depending on how many bad jokes I tell. And so it'll be about 25 or 30 minutes. And then we'll go ahead and leave plenty of time for questions. If you can, go ahead and put your questions in the chat. That way, if I cover it during the presentation, I'll just kind of blaze through those at the end. And then if anybody wants to ask, like follow-ups or clarifying questions, we can do unmuting, obviously, when the time comes for that. And then as far as the presentation copy, I think that we can make that available to everybody afterwards. So we'll clarify how we'll do that, probably just a follow-up to the registration link. Oh, actually, sorry, I guess we're going to want to email Teresa St. Peter. Her email is in the chat there. If you would like a copy of the presentation, we'll send that directly to you. I will share my contact info at the end of the slideshow or the end of the presentation as well. So you can always reach out to me, or you can reach out to us at our general email, licenses@denvergov.org. So I think, let me just check. I believe that Councilwoman Gilmore is joining us. Andrew, I'm not sure if you can give me a thumbs up if she's here or not. I don't see.
I'm here, Nicole.
She's here. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. So I will hand it over to you for just a minute to speak and give us your words of wisdom. And thank you so much for hosting this for all of us tonight, this afternoon.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole, and really appreciate all of the hard work that our partners at Excise and Licensing have been doing in regards to the residential rental license that Denver City Council passed in May of 2021. And so I'm Councilwoman Stacie Gilmore, and I represent District 11 in the city and county of Denver. And so that's a portion of the Montbello community, Green Valley Ranch, and I have all of Denver International Airport in my council district. And I have been on council for 8 years and recently was reelected and sworn in July of this year for my third and final term as the District 11 councilwoman. And, I started working on the residential rental license legislation, early in my time in office, and worked on it for about 4 years prior to Denver City Council passing it unanimously in 2021. And really, the reason that I championed this legislation was that we wanted to, in the city and county of Denver, ensure that every rental unit in our city met our minimum housing standards. And so those minimum housing standards are that it has working plumbing, that it has electricity, that it is free from rodents and pests, etc. And Nicole will get into that a little bit more, but it really began with, for me, a resident that rented a single family home in the Green Valley Ranch neighborhood. And they rented that home and in good faith put down $2,500 deposit and then paid, of course, the first month's rent and moved in, and quickly discovered that there was exposed wiring, that there was black mold, that there were significant health concerns from that property. And we were limited at that point in time as a city in how we could address that. And we were always working to react to things rather than being proactive. Because even today, if somebody has an issue with their rental unit, they can call Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, and they'll send an inspector out to look at that unit. And that was how it worked historically, but that was only on a complaint basis. And we know that many times renters in our city are some of those who are most vulnerable to changing economic conditions, to making sure that they can advocate on behalf of themselves if there is an issue with their rental unit. And so we wanted to be proactive in that area. And so we set up the residential rental license, and a couple pieces of the legislation that I do want to call out, and we can talk about it more. And I know that you're all on here because you most likely have single parcels in the city here that you're looking to come into compliance January 1st of 2024 for those single family rentals that you have. But we, wanted to make sure that this wasn't going to create any hardships for those who are renting. And so we also instituted, along with the inspection to get your residential rental license, a component of the legislation that if there's going to be any demand for rent, that prior to that rent demand, the property owner or landlord needs to supply the renters with their rights and resources, so that if a renter has had, a job loss or a medical occurrence, that we want to give them 30 days before there is a rent demand, so we can get them connected up with the city's temporary rent and utilities assistance program. So we can get them connected to a nonprofit partner to help them stay in their housing, because right now we know how much of a crisis it is in housing in the city and county of Denver. And again, we want to be proactive and make sure that we're keeping people housed and making sure that that housing meets our minimum housing standards. And so, we've all seen also some of those news reports of basement apartment units that might be on a single property. And, with the last hurricane that hit New York City, there were people who got trapped in their basement apartments because there wasn't a secondary egress for them to safely evacuate that basement unit. And so this is really a piece of legislation that is to protect, again, those who are most vulnerable in our city, and make sure that we're creating a good partnership with both the property owners and the tenants, and that we're keeping people housed at the end of the day. And so I just want to publicly thank Excise and Licensing for all of the heavy lifting on this, because we just got through the first full year of required compliance of multifamily apartment complexes being registered in our city and having that license. And it's going very, very well. And I have to really credit Nicole and her entire team with Excise and Licensing for making that happen. And so I'll be listening on to the presentation and available for questions as well. But I'll go ahead and, without further ado, turn it over to Nicole.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and sharing all of that background info for us. I think that's probably one of the most important parts. And so that was what I was going to get into actually here first. So we'll hear some repeats and just reiterating some of your main points. So once again, just want to clarify, this is the residential rental license program overview. I saw a few people popped on while Councilwoman Gilmore was speaking. So residential rental license program overview. Department of Excise and Licenses, we are the agency that is implementing the license requirement. As was mentioned just a few minutes ago here, the ordinance was passed by City Council in May of 2021. and then basically hand it over to us to implement the requirement for the license and the inspections and all of the things that go along with that. Once again, my name is Nicole Kim. And one more reminder for anyone who joined last minute, if you want to post questions to the chat, I won't be monitoring that while I'm speaking right now, but I'll go through those at the end. And then you can also just pop on and unmute with your questions. I might cover your questions. So if you want to hold off until the end, that's helpful too. And then one other housekeeping item that I forgot to mention earlier, I did post in the chat a couple of links that might be helpful if you're looking at those things while I'm speaking or for later. We have the webpage, our main webpage for the residential rental license program, as well as a link to the inspection checklist document, which I'll talk about that pretty substantially here in a moment. And then the inspection checklist guidebook, which is an accompanying document to the inspection checklist. So you can look at those now or later on, but just wanted to provide that as a resource for anybody who might want to look at those. So with that, away we go. So as was already, spoken about pretty extensively by Councilwoman Gilmore, again, we appreciate that so much. The residential rental program policy goals, number one is to ensure the minimum housing standards of rental units for the welfare, safety, and health of those residing in them. So this program is built on the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment residential housing regulations. So they are the agency that's responsible in the city for ensuring that properties meet those standards. And this program is built on top of that existing program. We also want to accurately track city housing stock and rentals, including the number of rentals, the rental type. So is it a single family home or condos, things like that, and the locations of those properties. Prior to this program, that did not exist. So we're building some information and database related to where these rentals are and what we have that will help decision makers make good decisions in the future related to housing. And then lastly, another major goal of this program is to obtain and utilize contact information to share city resources and information, both with rental property owners and with tenants as well. Councilwoman Gilmore touched on this a little bit as well. So if, say, for example, a tenant is struggling with a situation, there might be opportunity to share out city resource information. Similarly, there's a requirement for tenant rights and resources document to be shared by property owners with their tenants. Kind of gets everybody on the same page as far as whose roles and responsibilities might come into play in certain situations. And this will also, again, help us to build that database so we know and understand where property owners are and what they own so that we can reach out to them with relevant information should that need arise. Sorry, I lost my clicker here. So what is a residential rental property? So we're talking about the goals and all these things. So what is a residential rental property? This is any building, structure, or accessory dwelling unit that is rented or offered for rent as a residence for 30 days or more at a time. Some of you might be familiar with our short-term rental program that's also managed by Excise and Licenses. That's going to be rentals that are for 29 days or less. So think of like Airbnb or VRBO, things like that. So you might be renting out your condo just for like a weekend or, for people who are coming in for the Buffs game or to go skiing or something like that. That might be a short-term rental. Long-term rentals in the residential rental property is more like someone is living there. So you have a tenant, they have a lease with you, and they stay there, for months, years at a time. This program, like I already mentioned, this partners with the DDPHE, Denver Department of Public Health and Environment complaint-based program. So what that is if a tenant or an occupant of a property has a complaint about their housing. So I have no heat, I have no water, my appliances that are provided by my landlord don't work. They would contact Denver Public Health and Environment and make a complaint, and DDPHE would go out and investigate to ensure, that property was in compliance with those minimum housing standards. As a part of the residential rental property license application, you are required to have an inspection that's going to proactively ensure that those units are meeting those minimum housing standards. So when is a license required? So any property owner who receives a benefit from a tenant is considered renting. So what rent would mean is if a tenant does not pay any rent and they only pay for their utilities, that's not considered rent. and a license would not be required. If the tenant pays rent or helps with a portion of the mortgage, or if they pay the property taxes or the HOA fees for the property, then a license is required. Basically, you can think about it, if the tenant was not living there and the utilities were off, they weren't paying anything, then the license wouldn't be required. If they were paying those HOA fees or something like that, that's considered a benefit to the property owner and the license would be required. Property owners who live on site in that same unit and just rent a space to a roommate are not required to obtain a license. So let's say you have a 3 or 4 bedroom house and you rent out one of the bedrooms to your roommate, but you still do live there, then a license wouldn't be required for you for this. Accessory dwelling units, basement apartments, if they have a separate entrance, kitchen, and full bathroom, they're required to obtain a license. So again, basically, if you think about it, if it's a unit that someone is living in on their own, then the license is going to be required. And if you have any questions about particular, property configurations or something a little bit more specific than that, those would be things you could pop into the chat, or I'll talk about some application resources and how to contact us directly at the end as well. Important dates. So this program is being phased in. So we're doing it little by little in chunks. We are about to enter the last phase, so that's really exciting. As of January 1 of 2022, so that was the first phase, it became a requirement for landlords to provide a written lease to their tenants, and then also a copy of the Denver Tenant Rights and Resources document. And those are required at the time of a new lease or anytime that a rent demand is made. So make sure that you're providing those documents. We do have that Tenant Rights and Resources document available on our webpage. We have it in Spanish and in English. We don't dictate how you provide that document. So we've had some questions about, can I email it? Can I send my tenant a link to the document? You do just have to provide that. The next phase, like was already mentioned, as of January 1 of this year, all multi-unit properties needed to have obtained a license. So multi-unit for this program means more than one unit at a property. And I'll speak to that just a little bit more here in a minute. But basically, if you own 2 or more units at a property, then a license is already required. And then by January 1 of 2024, if you just have a single unit, then those properties are going to be need to be licensed by then. So that's what's coming up here. And then I'll be really happy when we're done with the phasing and I don't have to remember all those dates anymore. So like I've already mentioned and spoken to, we do have required inspections. This is probably the biggest component of this program. Again, to ensure those minimum housing standards are being met, there are these required proactive inspections. The inspections must be conducted by third-party private inspectors, and they have to meet the qualifications for the residential rental program. I'll cover those specifics in just a second here. We do have an inspector registry list. It's on our webpage, and this is meant to be a resource for property owners and managers to find inspectors, and you can reach out to all of them on the list. You can reach out to just a few. And that's how you can, get a head start on contacting those inspectors and working with them to find out what's their pricing and get scheduled for your inspections. The inspectors on the list do self-report to us that they meet those qualifications. So we do, suggest that property owners and managers verify that they have those certifications before you contract with them. We do not endorse any of the inspectors or any of their services. So if you call us up and say, who do you think I should use? We're not going to tell you anybody in particular. We're going to say, you can use that list and just make sure that they have those qualifications. All of the costs and scheduling are set by the inspectors and the inspection company. So same thing. If you called us and said, how much are they going to charge? We wouldn't be able to give you that information. You would have to contact those inspectors individually and work with them to figure out what's their cost, how far out are they on scheduling and things like that. So these required qualifications for the inspectors. So this is a big part. If you are going to contract with an inspector, make sure that they have these 2 qualifications. The first one is a certification by one of these 3 agencies. So it's the American Society of Home Inspectors, the International Association of Certified Home Inspectors, or the Master Inspector Certification Board. That's quite a lot. So again, we're happy to share this out, and this information is all over our webpage if you need to find this again. They also do have to hold a certification as an R5, C5, or C8 combination building inspector, and that's by the International Code Council. The inspectors who are on the list and who are working to complete these inspections, they know what these qualifications are. They will have them, and they will be able to provide you with a certification copies. Those are going to be required with your license application. Just one quick point of clarification here. So this seems like a lot, why are we requiring these inspector qualifications? So some states have home inspector requirements, and then they're managed and have some jurisdiction at that state level. Colorado is one of the states that does not. So the inspectors holding these two certifications means that they're going to have that home inspector certification. So they'll kind of understand like existing property situations, older homes, things like that. And then the ICC certification, which is that International Code Council, is newer codes, how to comply with existing code requirements, upgrades, and things like that. So kind of covering that whole spectrum of what they might encounter on these different property inspections. So again, inspections are required. If you have a multi-unit property, so more than one unit, inspections must be completed for 10% of the total, or a minimum of one, obviously, if less than 10. So 10% of your total if you have multi-unit. If you just have a single unit property, it's required to have an inspection, and then you'll apply for a license just for that property. When you have multi-units, one thing to keep in mind is that we can issue a single license for that property and all of those units, as long as those units are all on one parcel or contiguous parcels, so meaning touching and under the same ownership. So think about if you have, for example, you have two condos in one building. Those are going to be on one parcel or contiguous parcel, so you can apply for one license for those. Same thing if you have 3 single family homes, but they're all right next to each other and they're all under one ownership. You could apply for one license for those. This also covers if anyone, say, has like a big apartment complex and it spans multiple parcels or multiple blocks, like something like down in DTC or something like that. Those can all be on one license, and you can go with that 10% of the total for your inspection numbers. Again, if you have any questions about your particular property configuration, go ahead and reach out to us, and we're happy to chat through that with you. When selecting that 10% of the total, the units do have to be randomly selected by the inspector. So you don't get to pick which units are going to be inspected. That's up to the inspector, and they should use a random number generator. So it shouldn't just be their favorite numbers or anything like that. They should randomly select those. And then, like I mentioned before, there is this checklist, and just want to point out real quick that all the checklist items do apply. So this is going to include things like common areas and shared utilities. So just be prepared for that if that applies to your property. And here we are at these documents. So like I mentioned, there is an inspection checklist form. This is based on the residential health code, as we've already kind of mentioned. And this is the only form that can be accepted and submitted for your license application for these inspections. So this form is on our webpage. You, as the property owner or manager, and the inspector should be working off of that same document. So we would advise property owners and managers to go ahead and familiarize yourself with that document. Understand those checklist items that are on that document. There are 25 of them. And again, just to reiterate, these are the minimum housing standards as determined by Denver Public Health and Environment. And that's what's on the checklist there. When you're reading through that checklist, another document that is helpful is the inspection checklist guidebook. So the checklist has all of those violation items. There are 25 of them. The guidebook has additional information on how to apply those, how to determine compliance for each of those items. So they go hand in hand. Make sure you know where both of those documents are and that you review those. If you have any questions about the checklist, or say how to interpret an item, or you're wondering if something would be considered compliant or not, or you feel that there's some sort of a unique configuration that you might want to ask questions about, you or the inspector can reach out to Denver Public Health and Environment, and we'll be responsive to those questions. I provided the email here, but you can also submit those to us should that situation arise for you. And then just one quick call out, properties do have to comply with all other existing codes and laws. So you have to have the inspection, you have to comply with those minimum housing standards. You do still have to comply with like zoning, fire, and building codes. So things like that are still in play here. When you have your inspection, a couple of things to call out on the timeline. And then also we realize that re-inspections might happen. So you'll contact an inspector, you'll have your inspection, they're going to fill out that checklist document, like I mentioned, and you might have non-compliant items. If that happens, those will be noted on that form. You are going to go ahead as the property owner or manager and submit that application to us within 90 days of that initial inspection. So if you have all compliant items, this still applies. Submit your application within 90 days of your original inspection. If you need to submit a re-inspection document to us, You'll work with the inspector to get that re-inspection scheduled once you've made corrections to that property item that was not compliant. And then you have 1 year from the date of the application to submit that to us. So we get a lot of questions on this, but basically the biggest thing to keep in mind is once you have your initial inspection, let's say you all decide you're going to go get that inspection tomorrow, that's great. Make sure you submit your application right away. Don't hold on to it or, throw it in a drawer and think you're going to do it later. Just make sure you submit it to us, and it has to be within 90 days. And a quick heads up on that too. Don't just think, oh, it's about 3 months, because we do go exactly 90 days. So just get ahead of that if you can. And then when you have those non-compliant items, again, re-inspections and that documentation just has to be submitted to us within 1 year of that application date. I like to really stress that because it's a very important kind of component of the program there. So we want these inspections to be fresh when you submit that to us, but we do want to give you time if you have re-inspections, to make corrections or pull a permit and do work or anything like that that might be required. Please do keep in mind, unlicensed properties are subject to fines and enforcement. So when your license is required for you, depending on if you're single or multi-unit, a property is considered unlicensed until that license is issued. So if you're in this re-inspection process or something like that, you still could be, subject to receiving a notice of violation or something like that. There are a few exemptions to this program. I do want to just kind of call out, if one of these applies to you, we could definitely talk offline about this. This is pretty high level, but just keep in mind, new construction. So there are exemptions for properties that are built in the last 4 years. This means like a new structure, so a new house or a new apartment building or something like that. And it's in the last 4 years based on the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. So there's a certificate of occupancy document. There's a date issued right up at the top of that. If you need to obtain another copy because you're not sure what that date was, or you don't have it or something like that, you can reach out to the building department and they have those on file. There is also there are also exemptions for affordable or public housing properties. There is a fee exemption and then also an inspection exemption. So not any of these exemptions don't preclude you from requiring the license, but it might exempt you from getting the new inspections. So affordable and public housing properties, we know that they may be getting inspections by a qualifying agency. So maybe like CHAPA or HUD or something like that. So we don't want those to be overburdensome and have to have another inspection. So if you qualify for one of those exemptions, you may be able to submit that qualifying inspection to us in lieu of that third-party inspection. Again, more information about those on our webpage. And if you have questions about do you qualify and what are the submittal requirements, review the information on the webpage. But if you still have questions, please do reach out to us. On to the application. So once you have your inspection done, you're going to be ready to apply. The application is available online. It's in our Denver Online Permitting and Licensing Center. So if you've ever obtained a license for another purpose, like a short-term rental license, or perhaps you've submitted for online building permits, you might already have an account here. If you don't, it's pretty easy. You just go to the link on our webpage. You'll sign up for an account. You'll use a login and password, like your email address, and then you'll choose a password. And then there's an application package, and it states that it's for the residential rental license. That's what you'll choose there. So this is all online. And I'm going to cover a little bit about the application here. So the application is going to be 3 parts. Again, it comprises the application package is what we refer that to. There's going to be questions about the ownership information. That's going to be what's called your entity registration. So if you own the house, say just in your name. So if I owned my house and my name is Nicole Kim, I would just put the application under my name. That would be my entity registration name. If, for example, your property is held in an LLC or a corporation or something like that, that's going to be what you'll fill out your entity registration information with. The system will walk you through the package. I always tell folks, firstly, there are notes about what's required for each question on every single page. So if you're not sure what it's asking you, try to look for that information and it'll clarify what is it asking you. And then also, just keep chugging along. So the application is kind of building that package in the background. You might feel like you're answering some similar questions more than once, but really it's just building that whole package. The next part of the application is going to be the licensed establishment. That's asking questions about your property. And then the last part is going to be the residential rental property license application section. And that's where we'll ask you questions about that inspection, how many units do you have there? There are a few questions about utilities and some things like that. Things that we do not ask about are your tenant, how much rent do you charge, anything about their lease dates or anything like that. So just want to clarify that that's not going to be required, but we do ask about, again, the ownership, the property itself, and then some questions about for the license application, like related to the inspection and things. I skipped over this earlier, but for each property, you're going to apply new. So let's say you do have multiple properties and they're in different areas of town. So you have a condo out in Central Park, and then you have a house, in the Highlands, and then you have another condo downtown. You'll apply for each of those individually, and keep in mind that the owner should be the license holder. If someone is applying on your behalf, they can use their information and be an optional email recipient, so they'll get those communications about the license. But you as the owner should be the license holder. Like I already mentioned, the inspection checklist and inspector certification copies are going to be required documents as a part of your application. So make sure that you obtain those from the inspectors. They should know that that's a requirement and be providing those to you. You also might need to submit your ID, depending on how you apply. Again, if you hold that property in your name, you would submit your ID or some sort of, you could use your passport or things like that. If you hold your property in an LLC or corporation or something else like that, we're going to ask for an organizational document. So that could be something like a certificate of good standing. It could be the articles of incorporation or something else of that sort. We have those all listed out again on the webpage for the new property application. We also do require an on-site manager and their information. So this doesn't have to be someone who necessarily lives, on site or in an apartment building, they live in the basement or anything like that. This just has to be someone who has access to the property and authority to make decisions for the property. So this could be, for example, you as the property owner. This could be a property manager if you have one. This could be a neighbor if they agree to it, or maybe the tenant if they agree to be this person. It just has to be someone who has access to the property and authority to make decisions. So again, the application, we do have a bunch of application resources for you. So if you feel like there's a lot that you want to get prepared for, definitely utilize some of these resources, some or all of them. On our webpage, we have a new residential rental property application page. This is going to outline step-by-step all the information that's going to be required. It tells you all the documents you should gather, what the different choices on those document types are, et cetera, et cetera. We also do have step-by-step videos. So there's a video that walks you through click by click, literally, click here, type your name, click here, put your phone number in. So if you like to kind of watch that, you could do that. You can also, I would like to point out, you could fast forward. So the parts that don't apply to you, rewind, or go back to something if you get stuck on a part of the application. If you want to contact us, you can use our general email, which is licenses@denvergov.org. You can also contact us through 311. So if you're in Denver, you just call 311. If you're outside of Denver, it's 720-913-1311. Those are, again, all on our webpage. And then for this program, this has been a really great resource that we have found to be very popular. We do offer virtual and in-person appointments. So if you need assistance with your application, or you just want more information about the program, or you get stuck on something, or you feel like you have some sort of a unique question, you can make one of those virtual or in-person appointments. If you make a virtual appointment, you'll get a link to join a Teams meeting. Someone from my staff will meet you there on that Teams meeting, and you can chat through. You can screen share or say, I'm stuck here, or I got this request for information back and I don't know what you're asking for, or something like that. And then in-person appointments are at our offices, which is Excise and Licenses. We are in the Wellington Web Building at 201 West Colfax. You can make an in-person appointment, or you can just come in anytime. If you do walk-in assistance, you might just have a little bit of a wait, depending on if we're kind of busy that day. So just want to call those out. If you need one of those appointments or one of those other resources, please do use those. Application and license fees. So once you are ready to apply, you're going to have to submit the fee. That's a part of your application package, and that's how it'll come over to us. So as was already mentioned, the fees were kept intentionally low. So these are pretty low fees. There's an application fee, which is a one-time fee. It's $50. And there's also a discount to incentivize single unit owners to come into compliance early. This applied in 2022 for multi-units, but for the rest of 2023, If you're a single unit property and you apply early, you're going to save $25. The license fee or the application fee, again, is just that one-time fee. The license fee you're also going to pay at application, and then this will be what's due upon renewals again when you come to apply again every 4 years. This is based on the number of dwelling units that you have. So it's a tiered fee system here. So if you have single unit, it's $50. If you have 2 to 10 units, it's $100. So you can do the math and put that together. Again, if let's say you have a single unit property, your application fee is going to be $50, and then your license fee is going to be $50. If you apply early, you'll get that discounted application fee. And I do say this just on the next slide here, but it's valuable to mention this license is good for 4 years once you obtain it. So when you break down those fees over time, I think, for a single unit, it comes out to be something like $6 a month over those 4 units. So it's a pretty low fee, thankfully. Again, once we're talking about license issuance, so prior to the license actually being in your hand, just keep in mind unlicensed properties are subject to those fines and enforcement. Once you do obtain your license, it must be posted. And if you're doing online, like advertisements, the license number has to be included in those too. So if you're posting it on like apartments.com or Zillow or something like that, you do need to include that license number. And the format is there for you. It's a 4-digit year followed by BFN, and then it'll be a 7 digits number. The licenses are valid for 4 years. So once you get this process done, you don't have to bother with it again for 4 years, unless you have a change in ownership. Change in ownership does require a new license. This license is not transferable. So let's say you have this property and then you decide to sell, 1 unit of the duplex or something like that. That new property owner is going to have to get that license for their unit. And then just to share some updates and kind of where we're at. So this is a huge program. We're anticipating 54,000 of these licenses total needing to be issued. That would be if we were at like 100% compliance. As of today, we're at 10,893 active licenses. So that's license issued. We've received 11,643 applications. So we have some that are pending. We are experiencing a little bit of an application surge right now. So we know that single units are coming, the requirement is coming in 2024. So we anticipate being busy for, for the rest of the year and then definitely into next year. So if you are waiting, I would strongly suggest get on this as soon as you can, because we'll definitely be experiencing this surge for at least a little while. As of right now, the units that are covered by these licenses. So we have 6,302 single units. That's how many licenses are issued. And then we have 5,341 issued for multi-units. Excuse me. We do have, we track the number of units, like I mentioned earlier. So these licenses so far cover 150,000 plus rental units. So we can say that in the city and county of Denver now, 150,000 plus rental units are meeting minimum housing standards because of this license program. As far as the timing of processing these, so 77% of our applications are processed in 0 to 7 days. So meaning 7 days, same day all the way up to 7 days. But 77% of those are getting out the door pretty quickly there. I just want to touch on, again, the enforcement. So we did start enforcement in March of this year. To date, we have issued 1,710 notice of violations. That's going to be where you're going to get a letter from us that basically says you are not in compliance with the license requirement. Please obtain a license so that you are. So we are active in enforcement now. We are focusing on education and outreach. So if you receive that notice of violation, again, that's just to notify you are out of compliance. There's no fine associated with a notice of violation. That's kind of just the first step to say, please get this license. If you do get one of those, definitely reach out to us. We can put you in contact with the inspector who issued that. And then they can work with you depending on what's your timeline for compliance. So let's say you're going to say to them, I know that this is a requirement. I got my inspection scheduled. It's happening next week. They'll push out that enforcement schedule to work with you. If you don't comply with that notice of violation that you were issued, I do want to point out we have had citations issued. So citations are the next step. We've issued 238 first citations. Those carry a fine of $150. We've issued 38 second citations, and those are $500. And then we've issued 6 third citations, and those are $999. I do want to point out that again, we are, trying to make sure our inspection team is trying to work with customers and make sure that, we're just getting folks into compliance as they know about the requirement and, are at different stages of the application. You have about 6 weeks in between each of those timeframes generally. And again, if you're, let's say working on your re-inspection, or you had some sort of a delay with getting your initial inspection done or your application, just contact us if you receive one of those and we'll put you in contact with the inspector to work with them. And so that is all I have. I do want to point out one important thing on this slide. We have a residential rental property information bulletin. If you are not signed up, I would, strongly recommend or encourage you to sign up. We share out updates about the program, reminders about outreach opportunities like this. I did share my email address here. You can definitely reach out to me as well if you want a copy of the presentation or if you want to follow up afterwards. And then we also have our general email address, like I mentioned earlier, which is licenses@denver.gov. You can always contact us there. Those come directly to, me and my team, and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can. So that is all that I have for this presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and end that. And then I will go to questions. So let me stop my screen sharing here. And I can go back to it if I need to. So let me start scanning the chat, and if anyone wants to raise their hand, I think we'll go to the chat first, and then we'll go to questions by raised hands after that. So, and give me just 1 minute. Like I said, bear with me. It's a little bit difficult to look at the screen and then be looking at the questions. I will get all off track if I try to do that. So we have a duplex. Yes, so if you have Section 8 units, please review the exemption information on our webpage. There are qualifications. You have to meet one of the qualifications, and then you may be able to submit your qualifying agency inspection in lieu of the third-party inspection that's required. You also may qualify for a fee exemption. So there are 2 exemptions that you can apply for. If you have questions further about that, let's go ahead and talk offline, but do review those qualifications. And again, if you meet one of the qualifications, you can apply for one or both of the exemptions on your application. I'm trying to upload my documents. Okay, so we have a couple of questions about verifying that your documents were uploaded and related to the application. So what I would say to that is if you can make an appointment with us, we can, like I said, do virtual or in person. We usually have appointments available as soon as the next day. We can review your individual application. I probably can't do that right now. Reach out to me directly via email, and I'll put you in touch with one of my staff, or I'll personally look it up for you in the morning. But that's probably the best way to handle that one. This question, just so everybody knows, is related to document uploads. If you have any questions about that, or if you want assistance with that, I just want to point out, again, we can help you virtually. You can also come down to our office. So if you're not comfortable scanning it at home, or you don't have a scanner, or you don't want to take a picture and upload it, you can come to our office and we'll absolutely scan those documents and help you with that. I have properties in Lakewood. Do I have to apply for the license? Probably not. This applies to City and County of Denver. So you can definitely verify with addressing at denver.gov.org, and they will look up those addresses for you. We also have a page on our webpage that is the best address for your property. That's what it's called. And you can look that up to see, which address are you going to select to apply. And then the other thing that I tell people is if you pay your property taxes to Denver, then this probably applies to you. But I would definitely verify that if you have any questions. And again, if you have questions or you're still not sure, just reach out to us and we will go ahead and help you out with that. Typical pricing for an inspection. So again, the inspections are conducted by third-party private inspectors. So they are going to quote their own costs. They're going to handle their own scheduling. So I think a couple people are posting in the chat like what their experience was. So thanks for sharing that. I think that that's helpful. But we as excise and licenses, we won't quote any of those prices or scheduling. That's all third-party private inspector dealings that you'll have there. Same thing. What is the typical lead time to schedule an inspection? That'll be based on the inspector. I will say that I have fairly frequent contacts with the inspectors. So sorry. I have a tiny little touch of a cold. I'm hoping it doesn't get worse. So we have had contact with the inspectors, and generally they have said that they can schedule you out the same week. I think it depends on the number of units. So let's say you have a huge 300 unit apartment complex and you're going to need 30 units inspected. That'll probably need some lead time. I think that for properties who have 1 or 2 units, they generally can get to those within a week or so. I do like to just remind folks, you can call one of the inspectors on the list, or you can call all 50 of them, and just kind of get that information. I think it just depends on what type of person you are, or, if you want to call all of them and do some, compare and contrast there. Short-term rentals versus long-term rentals. Okay, so on our webpage, first of all, this question I think is related to where you find the application. So on our webpage, you're going to see the application package, and it'll specifically say residential rental licensing. It's the last choice under business licenses. Short-term rentals is its own application. They are very different programs. They're both kind of under our rental umbrella. Short-term rentals, again, though, are going to be rentals of 29 days or less. So I'm renting out my house for the weekend because I'm going to be gone, and I'm going to throw it up on Airbnb for someone to come and rent it for a couple of nights. Long-term residential rentals are someone lives there and it's for 30 days or more at a time. So there are different requirements for both. Again, if you have questions or you're not sure which one you're doing, you could contact us or review the requirements on both of those, and we'll try to help you sort that out. This is a great question. Thank you for asking this. So if the unit is currently occupied, do I get the license once the current tenants vacate prior to leasing the unit, or do I get the license ASAP? The answer is ASAP. So we do not ask you about your tenants or when the lease is. We want you to obtain that license based on that phasing. So again, if you have more than 1 unit at a property, you're going to have already been required to obtain the license. So do that immediately. You're already out of compliance. If you only have a single unit, you do have to get that license by January 1 of 2024. So this doesn't, the license doesn't stay with the tenant or have anything to do with the tenant. If you have a change of a tenant, that doesn't mean you have to get a new license. This applies to the property owner and that property. So the only time you have to get a new license is, again, when the property owner changes. So we're not going to ask you, is your tenant Stacie Gilmore or is your tenant Nicole Kim, and do they change? We don't want to know anything about your tenants. Great question. Thank you for asking that, though. If I have 3 separate single family homes, how many licenses do I need and how many inspections? So if you have 3 separate single family homes, it would depend how they are located. So if they're right next door to each other, let's say you have 20 Grant Street, 22 Grant Street, and 24 Grant Street, and they're all right next door to each other, those would be considered on contiguous parcels, so right next door, and you could apply for 1 license for those. If you apply for 1 license, you'd use that 10% of the total units as far as the number of inspections required, and for 3, it would be 1 inspection required. If, let's say, you have 3 single family homes and one of them is in Central Park, one of them is up in the Highlands, and one of them is down in DTC, those would be all separate properties, and you would be required to obtain a license for each and an inspection of each of those units. Happy to speak more to that piece. I know that that can be a little bit much to, kind of understand or think through your property scenario, but hopefully that clarifies that. For the inspect, and sorry, hopefully this format is working for everybody with reading the questions and kind of trying to get to them. So if anybody has questions and you want to raise your hand, that's fine too. Or if I get to your question and you want to post a follow-up, go ahead and throw that in there too if you're like, you did not get my question right. So if there is a condo with multiple owners, is there a way we can? Okay. So this question says, if there's a condo building with multiple owners who rent, is there a way we can have an inspection for the entire building? Can the condo renters have a single license? So the answer to that is no. So again, the license is issued to the property owner. So if you have a condo building and let's say there's, 100 units in the building and all of the units are individually owned and 10 of those owners rent their unit. Each of those owners who rent is going to need to get their own inspection of their unit and then their own license. Let's say that you are the owner of 10 units in that building, though. You have 10 condo units in this 100 unit building. you can get one license for all of your units. So if you had 10 units, you would need that 10% of the total, which would be one for yours, and you could apply for one license for all 10 of those units. Let's say that you have this condo building and it has 300 units and you own all of them. Same thing, you would do that 10% of the total, you'd have 30 units inspected, and you'd get that one license for that entire property. So again, just consider, are the units all at one property? Are they all under one ownership? Those are kind of the two qualifying criteria there of, can you get one license for them, or are they different licenses for each? The FAQ states the license needs to be posted. Yes. Does this apply to long-term rentals? Yes. So this is for long-term rentals that the license needs to be posted. I'm assuming that this might be referring to short-term rentals. So you do have a requirement to post the license and the license number for both programs. I did mention earlier, so if you have advertisements, so say like you advertise your property on Zillow or Craigslist. I don't know if anyone still does Craigslist or, Facebook or whatever you're doing. You do have to have your license number included in that. For short-term rentals, it's very important because that's how you are able to list on those Airbnb and VRBO platforms. If you don't have short-term rentals and this doesn't apply to you, just ignore it. But basically your license does have to be posted, whether it's for short or long-term. And then one thing that I do want to clarify, when we say the license has to be posted, so we realize for residential rentals, this is someone's home. So we're not saying that this has to be like on the front door. We can't give you guidance or suggest what you should do, but I would just say, make sure that someone has access to the license and could get a copy of it if it was needed. So, if you could show it digitally, or if you have it, in a kitchen drawer somewhere or something like that, that's fine. If you're the property owner and you have a copy of it in your office and could get to it, that's sufficient as well. Don't tell city attorneys that I am saying that, because that could be considered guidance. So just make sure that it's available, or that you could supply a copy of that if needed. So my building is 23 units. I own one unit. The other units are owned by other people. Is it correct that I must apply for my licensed unit individually? Yes. So that's exactly the scenario we're talking about here. When you have that condo building or apartment building and there's multiple units, but you only own one, or let's say you own two. If you own two, you could get the license for the 2 units. If you just own one, though, you get your own unit, and those other property owners have to deal with their own units and their own license and inspection and everything like that. I do want to remind you that the only thing that does apply that kind of takes into account the whole property is those shared utilities do apply. So let's say you have like a shared heating system, or perhaps you have a boiler or something like that. Those checklist items are going to apply. Specifically related to boilers, we do have a process in the inspection checklist guidebook. If you have a boiler at your property, I don't really know how popular those are, so I won't get into it, but let's just say there's a process in the guidebook related to boiler inspection. So if that applies to you, please go check it out. If you have questions, let us know. Okay, on to the next question. If you have. Yep, so if you have 2 single family homes, they would probably be on separate parcels, but right next to each other, and they have different addresses. So again, let's say you have 101 Lincoln Street and 103 Lincoln Street, and they're right next door to each other. They're single family homes and you own both of those. You could apply for one license with those 2 properties. Yep. So again, with the Section 8 properties, please review those exemption requirements and make sure that you understand those. And then if you qualify for one of those exemptions, it outlines the different documents that you'll have to submit, whether you're applying for the inspection exemption and or the fee exemption. Why do you ask about power type for appliances? So we partner with a bunch of different city agencies. One of those is the Office of Climate Action and Sustainability Resources, and they were interested, as well as DDPHE, which is Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, in what do these properties have in them. So again, this license requirement also includes a data gathering component. Right now, we don't know much about rental units and housing stock in Denver. So we do ask a few questions. So for example, is your stove gas or electric or some other material? So we were joking about that when we were building it out, and we said, who knows, maybe it's some sort of like fuel we don't know about, or, some sort of eco fuel or something like that. So you can fill it in if it's something different. But basically, we just want to know about housing stock, what's in those properties, and then that will help us make some good decisions, in those agencies based on climate and sustainability within City and County of Denver, and these properties are a big part of that. Please send me the presentation slides. Absolutely, just reach out to us. We provided an email address in there. It's for Teresa St. Peter. It's in the chat there, and then you can also email me. I'm happy to send this out, and I think that we're going to share the link to the recording. So if you are so entertained by my speaking to you tonight, you can definitely watch it again, and then you can also look at the slides one more time. Yes, please send me the slides. Absolutely. The next question, can an entity hold multiple licenses? Yes. So the entity registration that I spoke about earlier, that can carry through however many licenses that you hold if it's the same ownership. So let's say that you are someone who has 3 different condos and they're at 3 different properties, but they're all held by Nicole Kim LLC. So that's the owner. That's how you're going to complete your entity registration. Once you complete that part of the application, it's going to generate an entity registration number. On your next application, it's going to say, have you already completed an entity registration with Denver Excise and Licenses? You're going to say yes and input that entity registration number. If it's your first time completing the application, you probably don't have an entity registration if you haven't interacted with us for another license before. We're not asking for, like you to create a name of your business or something like that. This is going to give you a choice. Do you want to apply as an individual, or are you applying as like an LLC or something like that? Those are kind of the 2 biggest examples. Is an entity a landlord? So yes, so the entity is the owner. That's who we're asking about when we say your entity registration. So again, just think about, how is your property owned or held? So do you have like a corporation? Do you have a partnership, or something like that holds the property? I think, for not to make any assumptions, but a lot of single family homes, it's probably going to be you and maybe your spouse, or maybe you have you and your brother or something like that are the owners. There is an option to apply as a residential, rental, individual, or couple. That would be what you would select if that's the choice. So for example, if I held my house just in my name, I go to my property tax statement, it comes to me, Nicole Kim, that's how I would apply for this. If, for example, my property tax statement comes to Nicole Kim LLC, because that's how I own it, then you'd apply as an entity that's an LLC. And again, it probably sounds a little bit like pie in the sky, but the application does walk you through those steps, and it'll ask you, how is your ownership for the property. Again, more the people giving examples of their inspection fees that they paid. What's the early application date? So right now, again, we're kind of in this last little bit of opting into the phase before you are required. So if you have a single unit property, you are required to obtain a license by January 1 of 2024. If you apply by the end of this year, so we're coming down to the last little bit, if you apply before the end of this year, you get a $25 discount on your application fee. So we are trying to incentivize owners, to opt in early. You'll get that $25 discount if you are a single unit owner. If you're a multi-unit owner, unfortunately, the discount applied to you last year, and you do have that $50 application fee now. The whole thing is due. What is the best link for accessing the new residential rental license application? So I threw this in the chat earlier, but I will put that in the chat again if anyone didn't see it. Let me just grab that really quickly now. So the link to our main page is going to be, one of the best resources that you can go to. That's where you'll find, again, that inspection checklist guidebook. You'll find the list to the inspector registry. It's a spreadsheet that'll download for you, and that's how you can call, all those different inspections. Is the application to get an entity registration different? I already covered that a little bit, but again, if you have questions, or if you started the entity registration and you kind of got sideways, you can definitely reach out to us and we will clarify that for you. Okay, I messed up on my application. It's okay, don't panic. I misunderstood the directions for contact info. I put my property manager's name. Correct, yep. So you might not be able to edit certain things on your application. If that happens to you, contact us and we can do it on our end for you. So certain things, once you enter it, you're not able to enter or to edit it on the application side, but we can do that on our staff side. It looks like you scheduled an appointment and you said that nobody showed up. So let's look into that kind of offline. I'll definitely follow up with you on this. And actually, I remember this name. And so I'm hoping that someone did get to you because I remember this call, but let's talk about that offline. I'll follow up with you. I'm going to copy and paste your name here. And I will touch base with you. If someone did not attend your meeting, we can meet tomorrow or whenever you have time. Okay, on to the next question. Do you need a new inspection every year? No, thankfully, again, this license is valid for 4 years. So you're going to get this license the first time. And then in 4 years, when you renew your license, you'll require new inspections for your property. We have the renewal application pretty much built out, but it's just not turned on yet. The license program hasn't been fully implemented yet, but in 4 years, you will be notified that you're going to need to renew your license. You'll get an email. That's how we'll communicate with you. And that's when you'll need those new inspections. Okay, it looks like we are getting down. Okay, we have a few more questions, and then I think some folks were kind of saying that was when hands started getting raised. So I'm going to continue to go through the chat just because I think I want to get through all of those, and then we'll try to manage everybody with the hands up. And I do want to clarify, I'm so bad at remembering who was who in first, so just be patient, and I promise I'll get to everybody. What documents are required for a property held in trust? Hopefully not the whole trust document. So trusts are kind of interesting. You cannot apply as a trust for your entity registration. So what we want to do if you have a trust, if this applies to you, is apply as a member of the trust or a trustee. So let's pick on Councilwoman Gilmore. So Councilwoman Gilmore owns her property in Councilwoman Stacie Gilmore Trust. She is going to apply as Stacie Gilmore. It has to be a member of the trust. We want it tied to a person, not a trust, which is kind of like a different type of, organization entity. So if you have a trust, apply as a member of the trust. So whether that's you or, whoever else is in that trust with you, just pick someone who's going to apply and be the license holder. Trusts are a little bit unique. This is also covered in our FAQs on our webpage. So if you don't remember and you want to go back to it, it's in the FAQs. URL for verifying addresses are in Denver. So if you go to our webpage, which I'm going to actually just post it here in a minute in the chat. I don't want to lose my place in the chat. So I'm going to post that in just a second. And I will also grab the address verification. But basically, you can email addressing@denvergov.org. Or if you go to our new residential rental property application page, we have a tool there for finding the address. And it's also on our property owners page. Basically, you just want to find the Denver address, best address tool, and that's going to help you determine if your address is in Denver. Again, the other thing you can do is just look at your property tax statement. If it comes from like Adams County, thank you so much for coming to join us for this meeting, but it doesn't apply for you. This is City and County of Denver. So you should get the Denver property tax statement, and that would mean it's in Denver. How do you license 3 people under name as a license holder, or do I apply 3 times individually? Okay, so I think what this question is asking is, so let's say, for example, your property is held by you and your spouse. So you could use the residential rental individual or couple option for your entity type. You can provide both names or one. If this question is asking, I have an LLC and there are 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 people who are a part of that LLC, you're going to apply as the LLC, and then depending on who owns how much, you might tell us more about each individual owner. Again, the application will walk you through that process. Depending on how you answer the questions, it'll point you in the right direction. But basically, if you own your home individually or with your spouse, or maybe you and your sister own it or something like that, you could apply as that residential rental individual or couple, and you could apply with one name or you could apply with both. However you apply, that's who you're going to have to provide IDs or, ID or passport or something like that for. So just keep that in mind. If we come to your office to upload documents, should we start the application ahead? You definitely can do that if you want to. If you have no idea where to start, or you just want some additional assistance, or you have questions before you get started, certainly come on down to our office and you can do that there. We do have public computers that are available, so you can use those there. You can jump online to the online portal, will help you get logged in. So basically, wherever you're at, just come on down and we'll meet you where, wherever you're at. So if that's at kind of that first step, or if you're at step 10 and you're like, I'm just confused, or I want help with uploading my documents, but otherwise I'm all set, we'll help you wherever you're at there. Does an out-of-state trust have to have a license? So again, I already kind of mentioned trust. We're going to want to apply as a member of the trust or a trustee. And this doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where the owner lives. It's where that rental property is. So let's say you own a home in downtown in, like, I don't know, the Spire building or in Baker neighborhood or something like that. You own the home, but you live in Texas or London or, Florida or wherever. It applies because the property is in Denver. So we don't need to know where, it doesn't matter where you live. So wherever the property is. Are there any waivers or exemptions for egress in non-conforming bedrooms? So this is probably referring to the checklist items related to egress. So there is a checklist item related to egress in properties. There is some very specific guidebook language around that requirement. And just generally speaking, I'm not going to go to the exact language, but I would recommend that you do. Egress is going to be related to compliance at the time of construction. So if, for example, your house is, from the 1920s and egress requirements applied to a certain level at that time, your inspection is going to be based on compliance at that time of construction. If you've done upgrades to the property or you've done new construction or things like that, different code requirements will apply because it's compliant at the time of construction. If you have questions about your particular situation, you or your inspector can certainly reach out to us. I shared in the presentation and I can share here too, or reach out to us. You would actually contact Denver Public Health and Environment. They are responsible for those checklist interpretations. If you have questions about, would this be considered compliant or not? That definitely gets out of my lane as far as those technical requirements and, building codes and things like that. The other resource that is available to you is you could contact the Denver Building Department, and they can help you do that research on what was compliant at the time of construction, if this applies to you. So the next question, will we get notifications that a license is up for renewal? So yes, when you submit your application to us, you're going to give us your contact info. That's going to include an email address. When your license comes up for renewal, it'll be about, like, I think our timeframes are usually 3 months in advance of your renewal. You'll get an email that will say, Councilwoman Stacie Gilmore, your license for, X property is coming up for renewal. Click here to start your renewal, and it'll take you into that online portal. So again, you don't have to worry about it for 4 years because the license is good for 4 years, but we will have a process in place for that at that time. What trust docs do you need? So again, trust, you're going to apply as a member of the trust or a trustee. Inspection information there. I have 2 non-contiguous properties. How many application fees do I incur? So application fee and license fee is by application for each license. So if you have one property, that's over here, and then one property that's all the way over here on the other side of town, you're going to have an application and a license fee with that one, and then an application and a license fee with that one. Application fee is a one-time only fee. Did you say that there has to be an on-site property manager who can make decisions for that unit in an emergency? So it's not specifically for an emergency. We do require an on-site manager contact person, and that just has to be someone who has access to and authority to make decisions for the property. So again, should the situation ever arise where we need access to the property or we need someone who has authority for that, that's who that person's going to be. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, an on-site manager who lives there, or you don't have to go get a property manager if you don't have one, but those are examples of people who it could be. Should we start the online application before the inspection or after? So this question is more related to the timeline of the inspection and how long it's valid for. So once you have your initial inspection, you have 90 days to submit your application. The same is true for if you start the application, you would need to have that inspection within 90 days. So again, we can't really give you guidance or, suggest what you should do, but just keep in mind that once you start that application, the clock is already ticking. Same thing, once you have that initial inspection, that clock is ticking and you have to submit that application within 90 days. So 90 days, it's the big time frame there to keep in mind. Is the location name also the owner's name if it's a private residence? I'm not exactly sure what the location name you're referring to is there. Again, the application is going to walk you through and ask you different questions about the ownership, and that's going to be your entity registration. The licensed establishment is where you're getting the license for, so your rental property. And then it's going to ask you some questions about the residential rental license application, where it's going to ask you about your inspection and things like that. Teresa shared her email again, so if you want a copy of the presentation, please reach out to Teresa St. Peter. Why can't my trust be the landlord? These are the rules that we're following. So we are issuing this license under the direction of our city attorney's office, and we don't issue licenses to a trust. So again, we want it to be a member of the trust or a trustee. I made an appointment for Monday. I want it to be remote. That wasn't an option. How can I make it remote? So on our webpage, we actually have, and I wonder, it would probably be, let me just see if I can share my screen here again. Sorry, let me click on the right screen. So on our main page here, again, if you just scroll down, you're going to see some tables with our information. You'll see our new residential rental property application. I've referred to this page quite a few times. This has a lot of valuable information. Inspections and inspector information is here. Property owners and managers. These are the two tabs where you'll find information about the exemptions. Go a little bit further down in these orange boxes. This is where you'll be looking for a lot of other valuable info. So online application video, rental program inspection registry list. So this is where you'll find that list of inspectors. It'll download as a spreadsheet. The residential rental program checklist and guidebook are both right here. And then down in the bottom on this left corner, you can schedule a virtual appointment or schedule an in-person appointment. So if you schedule, if you click on schedule an in-person, it's not going to give you an option for virtual or in-person. And then similarly, if you click on schedule a virtual and then you come in person, that scenario, actually, we would just help you in person, but that's where you would schedule the virtual one if you want to do that. And it says that it's Microsoft Teams. If you've already scheduled one and you need to cancel, you should have an option to do that based on the email you received. Otherwise, just go ahead and schedule another virtual one. You'll get that link for the virtual appointment, and you should probably be able to do that for Monday. We usually have openings a few days out. Can you share the website pages for starting the application? Conveniently, I'm already right here. So back up top here. So this new residential rental property application, that is where you're actually going to click to start your application. So whenever you're ready to go, you'll come right here. And then in blue, it'll say apply online. And the first link that you'll see there is Denver's Online Permitting and Licensing Center. So again, there's a lot of information to sort through, but once you're ready to go, that would be where you would start. Does the email for the login need to be the same as the owner contact information? So you can use any emails that you want to set up your account online. So let's say you have like a Gmail account, and then you also have your work email or whatever you want to do. You just have to keep track of where your licenses are and in which account. So if you're setting up accounts for different people or something like that, just make sure that you keep track of which license you have under which account, because we cannot move those back and forth. But you can use whatever email you have or whatever email that you would like to. Thank you for your time. Good night. Thank you for joining us. Is the GFCI in every bathroom requirement similar to the egress requirements, even if the home is old? No. So actually the GFCI outlet requirement, that is a requirement that is across all the properties. So there's no compliant at the time of construction. The GFCI outlet requirement is, a safety requirement related to, this is where I get out of my technical lane, but the surges in electricity and things like that. So if you don't have that, you would have to do that upgrade. Again, read the information that's in the guidebook related specifically to that item, and it'll tell you how many you need. And if you have questions about that, please do reach out to us and we can connect you with public health and they can, talk you through that. Why is a trust treated different from an LLC? So again, we just cannot issue licenses to the trust. If you wanted to talk further about that, probably next up would be, our city attorney's office could provide you some, legal references as to why we don't issue licenses to a trust, but that applies across our entire license, across our whole agency. So we can't issue a license to a trust. We just want to issue it to a member of the trust or a trustee. My property has a basement and the tenant uses the basement for storage. Do I need to build escape window in the basement? So this question again, this is related to egress, which is a requirement on the checklist. The egress requirement does apply if there's a bedroom and or a sleeping area. So review those requirements, and that would need to be compliant at the time of construction. If you have questions and that doesn't make sense to you once you review that information, definitely you can reach out to us and we can talk you through that. And then the last question in the chat, and then I'm going to go to the hands that are up from folks. As a property manager, can I upload all of my owners' properties together, or do they need to be separate per owner? So this is a great question. Thank you for asking this one. So if you are a property manager and you are going to be applying on behalf of owners, you're actually going to want to set up accounts for each of those owners and apply for the license in each owner's name. So the license should be issued to the owner. And you wouldn't want to apply for all of those licenses under one account, because again, then you couldn't share that out with the individual owners. So for property managers specifically, if you're going to be doing this, we have some direction on our FAQ page, but that's kind of the gist of it. So if I'm a property manager and let's say I manage 5 different properties, I'm actually going to set up an account for each of those owners. You can use that owner's email. So like I could say, okay, I manage Nicole Kim's property. I'm going to use NicoleKim@yahoo.com as the email for that account. And then I'm going to apply for that license in that owner's name. Then I'm going to move on to my next property and I'm going to set up the account with that owner's name. So I'm going to set up, Stacie Gilmore@gmail.com as the account, email address. And then I'm going to apply for the license in that property owner's name. So property owners can apply on behalf, but just keep in mind that the license should be issued to the owner and in their name. Okay, I'm going to pause here in the chat and then I'm going to look for questions in the folks who have their hand raised. So I'm just going to go through here and I don't see that many. So I was thinking I was going to pop that open and it was going to be like hands everywhere. So kind of a relief there. I don't have to try to figure out who was first. It looks like David Moreno, you have a question or your hand raised. If you want to unmute and ask your question, that would be great. Or if you change your mind, you can pop it in the chat. Great.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So this is quick. I bought a property in August and it's rented already. So I was planning on applying for the license and everything, but an opportunity came up and I just closed on another property on the building next door that is part of the same HOA. It's 4 buildings. So technically speaking, I closed yesterday. So technically today I'm out of compliance with that other single unit because now I own 2, or is when I rent the second one that I'm out of compliance?
That's a great question. So a couple things going on there. So the license requirement applies for properties that are rented or offered for rent. So as soon as you offer that for rent, then that would be considered a rental unit. So let's say you bought it yesterday. And again, this is just kind of a general around this scenario. So let's say you bought it yesterday, but it's not offered for rent yet, or it's not rented yet. Then once you do that, that's when the license requirement would kick in kind of for that rental unit. If the 2 units, you said it's 2 units and they're in different buildings, but they're right next to each other, right?
Yeah, and it's part of the same HOA and the same complex, the 4 buildings, yeah.
So that would be considered multi-unit. So if an inspector was to visit you, they would say you do own 2 units at the same property now. And this is a benefit to you in terms of taking advantage of that 10% of the total units for the inspection requirement. So what you could do would be contact an inspector and say, I have 2 units, they're at the same property. One is 201 Grant Street and one is 203 Grant Street, or, unit A and B or whatever they are. And then the inspector is going to randomly select one of those units, because you would just need 10% of your total or a minimum of 1. They're going to inspect one of those units, and then you could apply for the license for both of those units together. You would not be able to take advantage of the discounted application fee because you'd be considered multi-unit, but you would be in that tiered fee structure for the 2 units. So in 2 to 10, you would apply for that, and it would be $100 for that, and then just the 1 application fee. Okay,
perfect. So that kind of goes into my second question, because I closed yesterday, but the former owner, I gave him, he's building a house and he hasn't been delivered yet, so he's going to stay for free for about three more weeks. So I'm not gonna rent, and I'm not gonna announce or do anything with the property until he leaves. So I kind of have those 2-3 weeks to start this process and do the inspection and all this, right?
Yeah, I don't want to get too far into kind of like suggesting what you should
Yes.
do or giving you any
And of
type of
course.
advice on that. But I would say you can review the requirements as far as, what constitutes rent and,
Got it.
getting rent from a tenant. And then also, is the unit truly rented or is it owner occupied at which point? And then just keep in mind, once it's rented or offered for rent, that's when the license requirement does apply.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. I see Tyra Harris has a hand up as well if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, you probably answered it already. It's Tyra Harris, but at any rate, you probably answered the question already. But I only just arrived because I goofed up and forgot the right time. So will there be a replay?
So I do believe that we are recording this session and that'll be shared out. I see Councilwoman Gilmore shaking her head. So yes, it looks like it'll be recorded and we'll share that out. I'm not exactly sure of the specifics, but I think we're gonna share that out probably with the registration list. So if you registered, you'll be able to get to that. And if you want to jot down Teresa St. Peter's email, it's in the chat there. I'm sure that if you reach out to her, she can also, and they're sharing that again. So reach out to Teresa if you have questions about where to get the recording and or the presentation copy.
But I did register, so I should be on the list.
Yep, that sounds good. You should get that. Absolutely. Any other questions? That's the only one I see, unless
I have a question.
Okay, I hear talking and I don't hear a name. So whoever you are, please go ahead.
Kristen Frazier. I have a question regarding, I had the inspection done and one of the non-compliance was an outdated smoke detector. Is that something the inspector has to come back for, or can we just submit a picture of a new smoke detector?
Yeah, so you're actually going to work with the inspector on that. So the different inspectors are going to have different requirements as far as how to complete those re-inspections. So what I would probably do if I was you is just contact them to see, is like a photo or a receipt or something like that going to be enough for them to determine that it's compliant. And then however they determine that compliance, requirement has been met, they'll give you that updated re-inspection document, and that's what you'll submit to us.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. If anybody wants to, come in with a real zinger, now's the time. No, I'm just kidding. David Moreno, I saw you popped up with one more question.
Yes, super quick. You said that the inspector have to randomly select, let's say I have 2 units, he's gonna select one. Does usually the inspectors do that ahead of time or when they get to the property?
Yeah, so I can't speak to the inspectors, and their practices for certain, but what we do here, or what I have heard, is that generally the way that would kind of play out would be you'd call those inspectors once you decide that you're contracting with, Inspector A or whatever. You'll let them know what addresses you own, and at that property they'll randomly select, whether it's 1 or 2 or however many you need, and then they'll let you know what those units are so that you can notify your tenants as well.
Perfect.
So that's kind of ideal case scenario how that should play out. Again, we don't excise and licenses, we wouldn't get involved with the scheduling of that, but that's how I have heard that happens. And certainly, you can go to your lease requirements or things like that for how much notice you need to give tenants and things like that. That would be case by case based on, the property owner and how you have those things written into your lease.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Absolutely.
I have a question.
Okay.
My name is Mariana Lee, and this may be buried somewhere that I haven't found it yet. But for instance, with fire extinguishers, do you have a place where we as landlords are told what type of fire extinguisher you want to see or the inspector wants to see? And because some of them are rechargeable, some are not. And the fire department no longer inspects them. You have to go to a private company. And so there are a bunch of of issues that if I can address all the issues that I'm aware of prior to an inspector coming out, then I don't have to deal with a re-inspection.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a great question. And I did just go ahead and pull up the guidebook real quick here. Like I mentioned earlier, the guidebook, a little bit of a lengthy document. It's 22 pages long. So we won't go through all of that here, but basically what I did was just, look for the section that's fire safety. And that's where you'll find information about the requirements around a smoke detector, CO detectors, and then there's a fire extinguisher present. There are some specifics around fire extinguishers. And so you'll want to review those. And then it depends if you're a single family or if you're in a multi-family residential situation. And that's what's going to apply to you. I can just say here, so for single family homes, basically fire extinguishers of any rating are going to be considered compliant as long as they're in good working condition. If you are in a multi-unit situation, so like let's say your unit is in a triplex or like a condo building or something, then there is the requirement of the 2A10BC for multi-unit property. So this is a great example though of, when you have the checklist item and you're not exactly sure what it means or how to determine the compliance with that, go to the guidebook and that corresponding section, and it'll call out all this additional information that you and the inspector should, both be working off of those same information pieces to determine, what's compliant and how are they making that determination of compliance or not compliance. And I absolutely appreciate you're saying you want to be prepared. That's definitely what we want to hear. So strongly suggest, that everybody knows the checklist and the guidebook and where to find those things so that you and the inspector have that total, transparency, and you're working on those same documents, working off those same documents.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay.
My name is Katie, and my property is a ranch style home, an older home in Montbello. Would I need to build an escape window in the basement? There are bedrooms down there and people do live there.
Yeah, so again, the egress requirements, and the only reason why I say I don't like to spend too much time on these is just they get a little bit technical and a little bit specific pretty quickly. So section 1 is egress, and that's what everybody's kind of referring to. So when you have those questions, I would say review this information in the guidebook for your particular property. And if you still don't understand or you're not sure if your property is going to meet that requirement, you can work with your inspector and, understand what they're going to determine as compliant or not, because ultimately they're the ones completing the checklist. If you do have situations where you want to reach out and ask for some additional guidance from Denver Public Health and Environment or the Denver Building Department, you can absolutely do those as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions? I feel like I answered very quickly to make sure we had time. So if anyone is hesitating at the last minute because you thought we didn't have time, we definitely do. But if not, then, I don't want to keep you guys too long. I'm sure everybody has very entertaining things, not this, to be doing. So please raise your hand or just speak up if you have any other questions, and then I'll do a last call for the chat if you have any other questions. Otherwise, I think just to reiterate, we'll share the presentation and the recording link out. So if you didn't have a chance or you want to watch this again, I encourage you to sign up for the residential rental info bulletin if you did not do that. And then also, if anyone is interested, or if you know of a friend or a neighbor who, hasn't gotten this done yet and might want more information, we do have 2 in-person sessions that are very similar to this. We're going to have those at the Sam Gary Branch Library in about 2 weeks here. We're having one on the 14th of November and then one on the 12th of December. Those dates are on our webpage. Those will both be in the afternoon, and you can come by and ask your questions, or if you like this presentation and you want to hear it again, I'll be going through that again. Please share that out, with any other friends or contacts that you may have that are interested in this and couldn't make it tonight. That's all I have. I don't know, Councilwoman Gilmore, if you had anything else, please feel free to jump on. Otherwise, that's all that I have for everybody tonight.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Nicole. And I think we have David back up.
Oh, I do see David one more time.
Sorry, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, so if I do a quit claim deed on one of the properties to put it on an LLC. But I'm the only owner of that LLC. Do I still need to do the whole inspection and apply for another license?
So you're saying if you own the property in your name and you get the license and then you move it over to an LLC, would you need a new license?
Yes.
Short answer would be yes. That would be considered a change in ownership. So I would say, again, I think without, kind of suggesting what you would do, probably if you were going to make a change like that, maybe do that and get the license, do those all at the same time.
That's exactly what I'm, that's exactly what I'm checking right now.
That probably would be the easiest answer to that question, but short answer would be yes. Change from David Moreno to, David Moreno Property LLC would be considered a change in ownership. So that would be the same as like if Councilwoman Gilmore sold her property to me, that would be same thing in our eyes.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you everybody for joining us. And Nicole, as always, you're a rock star. You have this forward and backwards, and just really appreciate how well of a presentation you put together. And just want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. And please reach out if you have any questions, and my office will get the presentation sent over to everybody who signed up. So thank you, everybody.
And thank you again, Councilwoman, and to all of your aides. Everyone was so helpful, and thank you to our interpreters for joining us tonight. And thanks for everyone jumping on and taking your time to listen. Appreciate you, and best of luck. Please reach out if you have questions.